Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. Today is the 31st day of January 2021, and my topic tonight is still a topic that I've dealt with in the past. The topic is to deal with communitarianism. Communitarianism is a makeup of what I would call the Hegelian dialectic, when they bring two ideas together, as they have in the last, since 1940s, the idea of capitalism and communism, that being the two different poles. And what happens is they create this in the dialectic. They create what we call the communitarianism, which is a blending of capitalism and also a blending of communism, and becomes one again. This is how this world has been going on since Hegel has written these things in the past. And it was adopted by the communists during Marx. His rule started in 1847, and trying to overtake the monarch systems in 1848, which they failed at. And then what happened was they were pursued, and many of them went to Switzerland, and eventually came to the United States. And I've done a video on this also, just to do with the issue of how the United States, that is the Lincoln administration, had communists already in his office. And there were many leaders that came from Germany, in fact, to push this idea of communism. They know well aware that people won't go for the idea of communism here in America, but they've already seduced the area of Europe. In fact, all the European community is a giant socialistic state with very little power from the nation states. So what's happened simply is that the powers have been reversed. Most of the countries that we would call that were part of Eastern Europe have been fooled. And they basically stepped in another trap, so to speak. And some of these Warsaw Pact countries, like Bulgaria and Poland and others, have begun to voice their discontent with what's going on there with the immigration of foreigners in their country, and the power base of being used by the European Union to control them. So they're just being, again, they stepped out of the trap that was with the communists in Russia, the Soviet Union, which the United States allowed this to happen under the administration of Dwight D. Eisenhower, who allowed troops not to get to Berlin, made us slow down in many ways, and this allowed the Soviet Union to take these countries that were in Eastern Europe. There's no doubt about that. And Patton was one who wanted to deal with the rascal, as they call it, to deal with the Soviet Union and do away with them, period. But as most will know, that Patton didn't live too long after those statements. They could not tolerate that. And so Patton was done away with. And so Eastern Europe fell into this trap. Most of the countries that fell, there was a couple of countries that actually got away from this, and that was the country of Albania. But Albania sided with the communists, that is Communist China. And this is one of the countries that basically didn't get involved in the Warsaw Pact countries. But the problem is simply they have a communist government, that is the communists, that is in China. What has taken place, though, is that Austria was also divided and eventually won its freedom, and it went to the west. It was actually split. That did not take place with East Germany. That is, Germany was split in half, and East Germany became communist. And we know that the Berlin itself was divided into four sectors: the British, the French, the United States, and the Soviet Union. What befuddles me so much is why did we even need the Soviet Union in the first place in the war, the Second World War? You see, now the United States gave tons and tons and tons of not only money, manufacturing plants that were built in the Soviet Union behind the Ural Mountains. This is a fact. The Ford Motor Company went there. We helped them build their tanks. We helped them build some of their airplanes. It was a fact. The Soviet Union would have been probably overwhelmed. It had to have been for the winter that took place with the Germans taking the grounds that they took, and then also that Hitler chose to attack Stalingrad instead of actually pursuing his intended deal was the oil fields. He chose to do that instead because of the name of Stalin, so to destroy it, which was, anyway, a mistake on his part, which was another mistake simply is trying to fight a two-front war, one on the east and one on the west. But anyway, I've kind of gotten off tangent here, but I want you to understand simply is that communitarianism is this. It is opposed to anything to do with individual rights. That's the key. You will understand me. In this country, already their communitarian laws are already being taking place already. So you're, as an individual, are no longer represented in this country. You are represented as a community. You are represented as a democracy, per se. And a democracy, and a pure democracy, simply is that the 51% always wins, which eventually leads to destruction of a country anyway. Democracies always fail. They've always failed. And they know that, and we should know that. But communitarianism is simply is the destruction of individual rights. There are what we call NGOs that are actually operating in Europe, are very out in front, what they call non-governmental officials who have power. There are what we call the private-public partnerships, which is what's taking place here in the United States, is a sleight of hand. It's a way to fool people by the government, who doesn't have all the money, but the private investing into these things, such as, maybe recreational parks, or building a hospital, or maybe building something for a city that wants to design the whole downtown area of the city. You see, and so what has happened is they have the power, because if they're not able, that is, the day's coming that these cities and counties and other areas they're not going to have the money to pay for this, because we're heading for economic collapse here in this country. That's what's going to happen. You see, and this is what this has already been grown and sown into the ground, and people are not aware of it. Like this, for example, where I live here is this aging council. That is a council for the aging people. Well, money comes from the public and private partnership. The public is the government infrastructure, and the private is the corporations or people investing in these things. And with that simply means that eventually they will have control of those agencies. They probably already written what we call bylaws for their way of actually controlling these agencies in the future. If the public, that is the government, cannot pay their bills, that is the debts on these particular programs that they're sponsoring. So this is you've got to understand this. They talk about human rights all over the place, folks. They talk about it in Europe. They talk about it in the Soviet Union. They talk about it even in Russia still today. What blows my mind simply is that Putin is still in office after so many years. And it seems as though he's popular, such and such, with the Russian people. But the point simply is, it seems to be a red flag to me. And many people run to the Putin in some way saying he's a great guy, such and such. I'm not going to debate that. My point simply is, why is he in power so many years already? You see. So it's not even hidden in that area. We also see what we call simply is the destruction of America. In other words, in ways, simply these seeds have been sown many, many years ago. You see, it's been sown in education, especially to train people that once we were a republic and now we are a democracy. And a republic is a different form of government, but most of the problems with Republican form of governments is to do with what we call lawyers. And I pointed out this to do with the 13th Amendment that was passed, but was pushed under the rug. During the War of 1812, the British came here to protect its invested interests, that is, which their interest was being controlled by the Vatican. That is, the Vatican simply and the banks could not allow the United States to do its own thing, you see. And part of that deal was simply they had a particular bill, and it was eventually passed and it was ratified by 13 states out of 18, as well as I recollect. Don't hold me to that. It's either 13 or 14. But the point simply is it was enough for the passage of the amendment, which is required by the Constitution of the United States. And so it was this that irritated the British, and they attacked the United States because they wanted to destroy this. They didn't want the people to know that this particular amendment, the 13th Amendment, was actually ratified. They had to deal with that. And so they destroyed most of Washington, burned the buildings, that is. And so when they burned the buildings, the records are gone, you see. And eventually the United States won the war, which that was not the key here. That was not why the British came here, you see. It was all to do with simply protecting the lawyers, you see. There are special people who write laws. See, they write laws to make us credible, you see. It's not about right and wrong here, folks. It's about them deciding what is right or wrong and making you a criminal. That's what these laws are. So there's been a slow meltdown of what I would call the freedoms that we once had in this country being decimated, being destroyed piece by piece. And so I'm here to warn you that the communitarianism is a Trojan horse. It's a horse that has come in and people are not aware of it. They don't even see it. Part of it's to do with Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030, whatever you want to call it. Their numbers, their idea simply is to destroy the first world countries and put everybody at a third world level. So everybody will be poor, everybody will be uneducated, everybody will be ignorant of what's going on, totally ignorant. And it's people who don't even see it because, see, they've been educated and reprogrammed and programming. And most people simply are, they just want to be happy. They just want to be carefree. But little by little, the foundation is going away. And with communitarianism, it's basically capitalism also, because what they'll do is simply this. They'll go into a city and they'll say, well, we like to have this property, city council. And they'll say, well, okay, we can work with you there, and we're willing to give you such and such amount of money. So this is how this stuff is done underneath the table. And so what transpires here simply is that the owners of these buildings are told that, your building is it's in bad shape. It needs to be taken down. So they'll condemn the building. So in other words, the owner of that building will get nothing. Do you see the evil in that? You should, if you're aware. And so what transcribes here is that those who paid off the city councils or governor or whoever it is to destroy certain things, to condemn it because of certain things is, well, this building's been built, it's 1925 and it's now almost 100 years old. We need to destroy it. And we see this. And then they'll put in some building or something else and design or whatever, and it's more uglier than the building that was there before. But guess what? You have to pay for the building of it too. See, that's part of the dirty capitalism here. And then the idea simply is that the communitarianism simply is that they want to do away with what we call single family housing. That's a red flag. You see, the government and those who are involved in this whole treason operation is about destroying the family. Because everything's based upon a free society. It's based upon a family. That's what it's based upon, folks. It's very simple. If you don't have good families, you don't have stable families, it's going to have an enormous impact upon society. It just works that way. And we've been seeing that for the last 60 to 80 years. And basically people have been put in what we call ghettos. It's just a passing of the buck, per se. It wasn't a place where people wanted to live. Many people came to the city basically to work, to find work, you see. And then the city infrastructure begins to fall apart. And so private, public partnerships work into that situation, such and such, and people are taxed even more. And if you look right around you and discover that simply the United States is collapsing right before your eyes, and it is, it's very clear what's going on. And this is a ploy. This ploy that these people did, it must have been designed by AI, artificial intelligence, because it seems to have an answer in everywhere to bring this, not only us down, but other countries down. It's not just the United States that's going to fall. It's going to be other countries, especially Europe. Japan is on its way, other countries such and such. And so what can I tell you to do? Well, part of this simply is you have to realize that government is illegitimate. You have to understand simply they're not our leaders, because they've already proven that they're basically traitors. They traded, you see, they're traitors. So there's no sense in actually giving them any respect. It bothers me simply is that when we hear someone like, for example, who passes away like John McCain, I don't know if you're well aware of this in foreign countries, but but the flag is brought down to half staff because this particular person was a great man, a senator or a congressman or someone who's involved with government. And they want you to pay homage to these people. You see that? You see the servitude here? Why would you bow down to them? And I'm not proposing other types of things. I'm proposing that you need to understand who you are as a person. You need to understand who you are. You're greater than they are. Do you understand that? But that's why they keep you in darkness, to keep you unaware of what's going on. And I don't propose, and this is what I see, and this I'm just trying to make it very clear to people out there. You going out and marching and doing all this crap in the cities and capitals and whatever doesn't do a damn thing. It never will. Because what you're doing is simply you're giving your energy to them. You're paying homage to their leadership, and you're begging them to do something for you. When you realize this, why would they do anything for you? Because let's be realistic here, folks. In America, The campaigns, very little money comes from the people anymore. Most of it comes from, corporations. They don't hide it anymore. It's in plain sight. That's how people are completely gullible now. And so the money has a catch to it, You see, I scratch your back, you'll scratch my back, right? You'll do something for me. And so this continues on. So they could care less about who you are. They don't care. And if you speak out a term and say something in a way that is derogative to them, they'll have the police tase you. See who's lords here? Who's serfs? You're not going to get away with it, folks. Those in power, you're not going to get away with it. You're just not. Natural law is going to deal with you. It's called karma. It's coming. And I warn you, people who do this kind of stuff in high stakes and everything, you think you're so cool and everything of that nature, you think you're great. Your life's going to be transformed soon. It ain't going to be good. And so what's happening is simply you're doing harm to innocent people. You're doing the harm, not us. You are. You're the ones who do harm to others. And natural law says I'm not going to tolerate that anymore. I'm not going to tolerate this stuff. Nope. That's why there has to be a shift in people's attitudes and understanding what's going on. You need to be aware of who you are. They make you look like you're inferior and themselves to be superior to you. When reality is that it's the opposite. They are inferior to you. But you've been programmed all your life to believe that there's some great people. When you realize simply is they've done everything in the world to just make your life more miserable. They have. How you can see it clearly. All this change, the radical change took place after the Civil War, the war between the states. Everything changed. What do you mean, Brian? The South was the economical power before the war. Are you aware of that? Now, I'm not going to debate the issue of the slaves because this is not what I want to talk about because simply people think that's the issue. I'm going to point out simply is this. Slavery was not what they say it is. And let me explain that clearly here. There were major, what we call huge plantations that had slaves. There were, I think, when I recall, there were 3 or 4 large plantations that had over 500 slaves in the whole South. That's all. Most people were indentured servants. That was meant to simply as they came here from a foreign country and were paying off their debt as a servant, a slave, to own that, not own that land, but just to use that land. They were sharecroppers. There were sharecroppers here in the South to the 1930s and 40s, folks. The South was punished because of what they did. The South has always been punished for what it did after the war, when it lost. You see, that was a base of what they were called states' rights. Patrick Henry understood the story very clearly. He understood that basically the South was going to eventually lose because simply as there were more northern states than there were southern at that time, and he knew that was going to be a problem in the future. Not, this is a day before, U.S. senators were not elected to office. They were given the position by the state legislatures that they were in that state. So there were 2 senators per state. That was part of the equality. but the other was based upon the House, the lower chamber of the United States, based upon population. And only those that voted were in those areas where people who owned land. And eventually, he knew that simply is that there was no way this was going to continue on. Eventually, slavery was going to fall out of figure anyway. Most were not actually fighting for slavery. They were actually fighting just to be away from the North. They wanted to secede from the South. And as we understand, if you study history long enough, before they burn all the books, is that the states created the Union, not the other way around. You need to figure that one out too, because that's clearly here. So the states gave power. But what happened after the war between the states and what's happened to the South is the South was put under martial law. Are you aware of that? Most are not aware of that. There were those that came here, what they called themselves carpetbaggers. They came in and stole from people, from the Southerners who had no money. They stole from the people here. The taxes went up and people didn't have any money because the Confederacy lost the war, so the money was totally useless. Very few people had any money. And those that had money, that's why they protected most. I don't know if you know this. When Yankee troops were coming through in southern areas, people buried their silver and gold. You know, the silver candlesticks and all this stuff that had silver in it, because people didn't have stainless steel back then. Most well-off people had what we call silver. They ate off of silver, you see. They knew that silver didn't spread germs. So you could always clean silver, wash it, but you couldn't do with it with a wooden spoon. It's a different ballgame. That's why many people in the poor contacted more issues, had more problems with their health. So let's go back here. Let's just continue on here. The president after Lincoln was Ulysses Grant. And Ulysses Grant's administration was enormously filled with his family members. So it was corrupt. And he is, as far as I know, let's see if I'm thinking it's correct. No, he's probably the second or third person who was a general, General Grant. We know that simply is that George Washington was a general. And we also know that Andrew Jackson was a general. So this is the third general that acted. So he's a military person who got in office. There are not many of those, you see. In fact, as far as I know, the last one simply was Dwight Eisenhower. If I'm correct on that. But anyway, back to the point here is simply is that so what happened was the expansion of the federal government, centralizing of the government. So it's a form of hierarchy. So the more and more powers at the base is no longer at the base, but it's at the top, you see. So the expansion of government took place in the 1870s, continue on. And then what we had simply was the laws in 1871 that eventually allowed the capital of the United States, Washington, to have its special district. So it's already been bought. The interest, those who wanted to get the United States in wars now was more and more emphatic. It's also the creation of what we call the corporate person. This all took place gradually. Most people were not aware of it. Didn't understand what was going on. The only way they knew about it was in the newspaper. There was no radio, and there was no television, which in some ways probably was a blessing. You could spend some time in nature, as some of those people did. But as it continued to wear down, it continued. So the power of the apparatus of the government has become bigger and bigger and bigger. And in order for it to do everything, it had to take more. So, capitalism is not always evil. This is what people don't understand. Free enterprise, as far as good, but capitalism itself is not evil. But the point simply is that men have become evil by simply getting paid off. If it had said no, it would not have happened. But most of these men wanted money. The love of money is the root of all evil. Not money itself, but the love of it. See? And so this continues on. And I won't go into a lot more detail because I've done Woodrow Wilson, shared about him. And I'll do a series on Franklin Delano Roosevelt, which is unbelievable when you think about it. He was voted in for his fourth term. That's scary. That's more than scary, in that way. Which they have to now no longer have no more than 2 terms in the president. So back to communitarianism simply is this. Your individual, this is about individual rights and human rights. And there's a big difference, folks, because human rights doesn't represent the individual anymore. Communitarianism is a representative of the communist form of government. You don't own any property. You don't have any rights, you see. Only the group now has. This is what we call, like I said, the 51%. They've already told you that you're a democracy. Yeah, well, that's not true neither, but it's become that way. It's become a mobocracy. It's a mob rules, you see. And that means that only the 51%. And what they want you to do is be more and more divided, which is what they're doing, is you fight against this whole system. And I'm not interested in fighting any kind of system here. I'm just saying simply pull your power away from them. Don't give them your energy anymore. Don't give them your energy. Don't believe in them. In other words, when they tell you what comes out of their mouth, it's a lie. It's LIE every time. And all you have to realize simply is, I don't believe in your government. And eventually, if enough people see this and understood it, you will see that the emperor is naked. He has no clothes because he has no power. You see, when you vote, you're giving your energy to them. You're saying, I like the system. I love the system. Even though it takes 45, 50% of my money, I still like the system because I'm free. I'm free. You see. And so you are approving the system by voting. And you still can do the choice on what I would call simply the middle path. And that's part of what I say simply is a different perspective. That means simply you just don't give them your energy. You don't vote Republican or Democrat. You don't vote white or left, or red or blue, whatever it means. You just say, the hell with it all. I don't want anything to do with you. Because I don't see you. You don't have the right to rule over me. You don't have that right. You see, never have. That's how they con people. That's how they started out gradually doing little things here. And people say, well, then what are you saying, Brent? You don't want any government? I'm saying simply these people should be self-ruled and self-govern themselves. And if you understood that what's right is right, and Jesus made it very clear, do unto others and you will have them to do unto you. That's a simple rule. Do I want to get hurt by someone else? No. So I don't hurt others. I don't seek out to hurt people. You see, I don't pursue that. And I don't have any desire to rule over you. Anabaptists understood this. Did you know that? That's why they never ran for political office. Most are not aware of that also. They understood as a religious group, as a Christian group, that was not the way it was supposed to be. I do not run for office to rule over you, you see, because they didn't see that as being part of the Christian kingdom. Now, I'm not proposing anything to do with Christians and stuff like that, but I'm saying simply, they understood something that most people don't understand. They just want to be left alone. And you've noticed this simply the Amish, especially the Amish, the Mennonites have just kind of traded in They become they've kind of compromised. But the Amish are still what I would call simply, that's, nope, I don't want that. We don't need a telephone. Nope, don't need that. Don't need modern conveniences. Because they saw the entrapments of it. They saw the old ways being destroyed by that, you see. And the other way was simply as the Mennonites got involved and simply said, we can make more money if we have this and this and that. No. The Amish understood this. It wasn't about money. It's about taking care of your family. See, I work enough plow or whatever I do here, working on the farm, have cows, have pigs, chickens, to provide for my family. If I have extra, I either give it to others or I sell it for a small price. It's not about me making tons of money. You see, this is how this whole thing goes here. People don't understand all these things, how certain groups just fall in. The Anabaptists were what they were called radicals during their day. They were killed by the Protestants and the Catholics. You heard me, folks. The Protestants, all Protestants killed them. So did the Catholics. That's kind of a red flag to me, isn't it? You? It should be, because it's history. Very clear. So they understood simply is it's not my prerogative to rule over you, so I'm not running for office. I'm an Anabaptist, and I don't believe in government. I believe in self-governed. I believe in simply as I do good to my neighbor. I don't steal his stuff. This is all basic, folks. This is so basic. And yet most people they don't see this, you see, because they're caught up in trying to make money, So my point here, and I won't go too much more into this, simply is that communitarianism is going to be far worse in certain ways than the communist rule, because there's going to be all kinds of rules. And we know this is part of, if you read anything to do with Revelations, is their plan, if I understand it, is that they basically, those who don't go along with the system will not be allowed to be in the system, which is what you want. Don't you understand that? You don't want to be in the system. Because if you're in the system, you're already a slave. All you got to do is take care of yourself and do unto others as you would want them to do to you. That's all you got to do. And not be caught up this right-left type of deal. Always right-left, always this way. And that's the beauty of the whole thing. And we get caught up in what I would call simply is, well, I need to have a medical system. I need to have this. I need to have an education system. No, you don't. One of the most perfect things to do this, I explained this with a board tonight on Facebook. Start having your kids at home. Mommies and daddies, have your kids at home. Have your kids. Do not go to the hospitals. Do not go to the medical systems, because that's how they get you into it. The mom signs over the child to the state. That's what a birth certificate is all about. It's all to do with simply is the country's already gone broke, too, in the past. So they would be financially dependent, not dependent, but they would be financially responsible for the debts of the past. It's how they rigged this whole thing. And so it goes back simply, it's a very easy thing to do. I've already talked to one person who's done this, a couple of people actually. You just don't have the kids at the hospital anymore. Why would you want to have a doctor touch you in places, especially in your vagina area? It's none of their business in there, and yet they do that. You see, they rape women while they're doing this. And they say, oh no, it doesn't bother them. See, they've been told all this bullshit. It's all lies. The medical system is nothing but a satanic system. It's not there to save your life anymore, folks. It's to get you trapped. And so you're responsible for your health. And I mean, if you're born at home without any of this paperwork, legalese, lawyers who are involved with this, then you're free. You're out of this. You're not in the system. But they keep you in fear because simply they say, well, something might go wrong, about your child. But when you think about it, that's fear. A mother knows more about what's going on with her if she's in touch with herself and having a child. She knows when it's coming. She knows what's happening. She doesn't need a doctor to tell her. You don't need a nurse to tell her. You don't need to give a drug or something like that. Let me help you here. After all, it's pretty hard to basically push a baby out when you're laying on a bed. It makes no sense. You stand up. You stand up and have a child. You stoop. But you've been lied about that too. So many things you've been lied to about. And you're manipulating, and you don't even know it. It's really sad. So when you do these things, if your mom's has got courage and does this thing and has a supportive husband along with her and helps her, then that child is free. That child is free. It doesn't have to go to the educational system. It doesn't have to go to school. It's not a part of the birth certificate whole deal. You see, you have done something great for your child when you do this. Most are unaware of that. And then the sad part simply is mom and dad decide to circumcise their child, especially baby boys. It's against the law to do anything with a girl now, although that's not means it doesn't happen. Law, the religion still has an impact upon that. But boys, the infants have no choice in the matter, and they're traumatized. Either the first or second day of their birth. What a terrible thing to do to a child. So this is the reason why that boys have a hard time in being who they should be. They've lost their connection in a lot of ways because of the trauma that was done to them. Because in a lot of ways simply is mama let them down. And there's no blame there. Most do it because of religion. You have to forgive your mothers on that behalf too. You can't hold a grudge. It won't work, folks. So when you do that, guess what? You don't go to school. You learn what I call unschooling. You're able to teach yourself when you go in nature. Do you understand the beauty of that? That you can see all these things and educate your own self, not being caught up in this foolishness that they give us that we have to unlearn 30 or 40 years later. So the child then can actually be free. Doesn't have to be responsible for going to, doesn't have any responsibilities to get involved in the military. That's all out the window. Do you understand this, women? It's the most critical thing you can do for your child. It's the most loving thing you do for your child is to have a child at home. You need supportive husbands. And you probably need what they call a midwife. But it's none of the state's business. You see, it was done many years ago. It wasn't the state, it was actually the church. That's why there was mass. That's mass, not mass, I'm sorry. That was to do with infant baptism. That's why it was instituted by Augustine. You see, part of the Constantine's church situation that he created. So infant baptism meant if you didn't baptize your child, that there was a fear factor that that child, within 8 days that it passed away, was going to hell. And they used fear. The church used fear. And so, the Anabaptists didn't do that either. You see why they were hated by the authorities in the churches? Do you see this? See, infant baptism takes place in Lutheran churches. Infant baptism takes place in the Presbyterian churches because they're tied in with the state. You see, that was another beautiful thing about Anabaptist thinking. They knew that the state itself was a problem. They knew that the problem simply was that the Catholics weren't right. They knew that Luther was not right. They knew that Calvin was not right. I'm not an Anabaptist either, but I'm just sharing with you simply as they saw some things. They understood things that most people don't understand today. So the beauty is simply is they saw that simply anytime I tie my hands or make an agreement, and that's what license is too. See, oh, you got to be a license. You have to be a license. You have to be licensed to be, a doctor. He's got a practice. A practice. Well, it's the same thing. Well, he has a practice. So they're just practicing on you. They're practicing law, medical on you. They're fooling you all the time. Wake up, folks. Be aware of what's going on around you. If you truly want to be free, you do no harm to your children. The most loving thing you do for a child is to have that child at home. And someone will say, Brent, you're not a woman. No, I'm not a woman. But you're sowing seeds of goodness to others, especially your children, that they may be free, truly free, to not take in the bondage that me and you have been involved in. So these are some of the gleanings I want to share with you. Hopefully some would grasp what I'm sharing. I know it's longer than normal. I needed to get this out, just off my mind, and I wanted to share this tonight. I appreciate you listening, and you have a good evening. I try my best to show how this connects. And again, I'm saying this clearly. Those that are pushing these ideas, communitarianism is not for the benefit of you whatsoever. Go look up the Georgia Guidestones and read the English on it. Look it up. Or even better, go there and see it. It's north of Elberton, Georgia. About, I don't know, 10, 15, probably about 10 miles north of Elberton. Nothing fancy about it, except when you suddenly look out in the rural community, it's nothing but farmland. You see this structure out there, it kind of catches your eye. Okay, wish you a good night. Take care.